All right, hey everybody, welcome back. I hope everybody had a fantastic weekend. Hello, Maria and everybody else. So, look, man, this is like one of my favorite nights of our nightly call series, which is we get to start all over on our manual and begin going through things. The reason I like tonight is we really get to lay a foundation, and we're coming at it with the absolute most current information to lay the strongest foundation because we're starting with slide one. Now, the journey that we're going to take over the next, we'll see how long it takes, right? Because these calls are really built for you guys to ask questions, for us to structure deals, for me to help you write contracts, for me to help calibrate anyone's understanding of what's going on. So that is always the highest priority on these nightly calls. I generally will get information either from weekly reports, from messages that folks will send me, or PRN as needed. Right on these calls, you can just chime in, interrupt, throw something in the chat, and let me try to make sure that you have the proper understanding on what it is that we're talking about. Now, balancing that is the fact that we do have a lot of information in the manual that should be gone through in an organized manner. And with that in mind, what I attempted to do in the last cycle, and what I think we'll probably do even better this cycle, is I'll see if there's any questions, things that we need to cover at the outset. Certainly if there's deal structures, we'll cover deal structures. But I'm probably going to spend, 30 minutes or so on the program manual, particularly if there aren't any questions on things. That allows us to get through the manual in a little bit more of a rapid pace, and it allows you to go back and reference things from the manual without having to really search through the portal or through the various calls. So that's the intention. Now, the journey itself. First of all, if what I present tonight and tomorrow and the next night and the next night, if you're already beyond that, you can always go to any slide in the deck in our program manual and just go find the corresponding slides with the corresponding night that we talked about that topic. So for some of you who are saying I go too fast, you won't need to do that. Just follow along with this new way of presenting everything in the manual. And for those of you who think it might be going a little bit slower than where your current understanding is, then you can go past where I'm going to be tonight, tomorrow, the next night, and use the last cycle. But the journey itself really crosses let's say five thresholds. The first is that, and I'm talking about thresholds of understanding. The first is we must have a strategic overview of the business. What kind of strategy are we going to deploy to make cash now, to make monthly cash flow, and to build long-term wealth? What is our strategy of doing that? There's all kinds of strategies when it comes to real estate investing. We're going to talk about what I consider to be the most streamlined approach through the lens of 30 years of experience that I've had and how I run my business and how I would expect that others might want to replicate because it's worked so extremely well. Strategy, of course, isn't enough. Once you get past strategy, you understand intuitively what it is we're doing. We then have to look at things from a little bit more granular perspective and address each individual deal structure that populates this overall strategy of being able to transact with every seller, which I'm going to get into. So the second threshold would be understanding the different deal structures that we deploy in the market to give the seller what they want and for us to get what we want, which is to profit from these deals while still satisfying the needs of the seller. Once you understand the strategy and the deal structure, the deal structures, you've crossed two thresholds and you're entering into the third dimension, if you will, the third level. That next level is, okay, I have it in my brain. Now, how do I get it out of my brain and roll it off my tongue so that it's compelling and persuasive for the seller? That means we have to understand what our approach is to the seller. Our approach is not to jam a deal structure down someone's throat. Our approach is not to insist that their house is worth 50, 60 cents on the dollar. Our approach is not to insist that they take monthly payments, otherwise they're a moron or something like that. Our approach is to ask questions, learn what they're willing to do, learn what they're not willing to do, talk about the pros and cons, the alternatives as you'll learn, and then plug them into the right slot. They are 100% of the time, the seller is 100% of the time going to do one of the things that we're capable of servicing, which means you should have a pretty high conversion ratio. Now, you're not going to have 100%. Nobody wants to work, nobody bats 1,000, right? You're not going to get 100% of the people. But 100% of the people are going to end up doing one of the things that we offer. If a restaurant offers everything, Italian, Chinese, Mexican, American, Vietnamese, whatever, that doesn't mean you always go to that restaurant. You might choose a different restaurant that doesn't offer those many options, right? They might choose to use a realtor who isn't you on a deal. But the point is that when you have such a robust offering, you have a much greater propensity to actually get the seller to agree with you. Because one, you're not trying to sell them anything, you're simply trying to help them. And they get your genuineness, they get your authenticity, they get that you're being transparent, and then because you're discussing things with them, they begin to see your expertise, your competency as you talk them through the alternatives, and people become more likely with a greater proclivity to actually work with you. So our approach is instrumental to getting deals done, to getting acquisitions done, because this is the biggest asset that a seller has most of the time, not all of the time, but a lot of the time, the biggest asset that somebody will ever have and ever sell is their actual personal residence. So if that's the case, these people are going to be careful with who they work with, and they want to see somebody who has two things, character and competency. And we're going to put you in a position, because I can't teach you character. You won't even want to learn character from me, having got to know me over the years probably, right? Because a little bit of a smartass sometimes. But competency-wise, I've done this for a long time. I know how to do this, and expertise-wise, I can transfer some of these skills to you. All of you I've met, all of you we've had a Zoom call, we've all worked together, and I think of you as having high integrity. That's why I'm willing to arm you with these skills so that we don't go out and disrupt the market doing crazy stuff. I try to operate with the utmost of integrity and character, and I expect that all of y'all would too, but I have no control over that. What I do have some control over, not control, but ability to impact is your adoption of these competencies, these skill sets, and this expertise. And that's what I'm going to aim to do as we go forward here. So that third dimension is really knowing what to say to the seller. You got to know what to say to the seller when you approach them, because first impressions are lasting. So that first impression makes a big difference. I would submit to you that what happens next, once you have created that impression through your approach and their defenses are dropped, now it's like, okay, I kind of like this guy or gal. Let me see if this is something I want to do. Then they will ask you questions. They will raise concerns. They will raise objections potentially to what we've presented as to how we want to buy the house. And we will address those. And we will address those in a particular way. There's about 31 different scenarios that can possibly come up. I haven't seen a new one in a decade. So it's pretty well established what the concerns, questions, objections are that come up, and we've perfected answers to those. So in perfecting your ability to answer those questions, you run through a simulated environment, an application that allows you to practice your response to that objection that invariably is going to come up from time to time with different sellers. Not all 31 will come up with every seller. Sometimes one comes up. Sometimes 5 come up. Sometimes none come up. But you need to know the 31 responses. And the best way to do that is to think of it like you're an actor or an actress and you are trying to memorize a script. Not that you have to be so canned when you talk to people, but through that memorization, through that repetition, which is the mother of mastery, you will then be able to have a conversation with the seller that flows a lot more smoothly. So we ask you to watch the way I handle the objection, and then you try it yourself, looking right into the camera as the actor or actress in the simulation presents the objection to you, and then listen to yourself back. That's how you sound, folks. When you listen to yourself back, that's how you sound. So we want to course correct. Or you might be like, I'm not submitting that. Let me erase that and try it again. You do it again. It still sucks. You erase it. You do it again. Maybe you go back, watch me again. Maybe you go read the script that's in our simulated environment. You get it to where it's just about perfect. It's not going to get any better because of your own limitations. And you hit submit. Doesn't have to be perfect. Remember, perfectionism is just another form of procrastination. I didn't make that up, but it's one of my favorite sayings, and it's so true. Sometimes good is good enough, and you'll get it good because you're not going to want to submit it if it sucks. So you're going to sort of self-monitor through those 31 objections. So that gets you through our approach and our objection handling. The next threshold that we have to cross, which I submit is easy, complicated but easy, because it won't take you very long to get this, is we just need to learn how to memorialize the agreements that we get with sellers in writing. So I take you through a contracting phase where we're going to be talking about how we fill out contracts, how we fill out agreements, how we put the paperwork together that protects the seller, protects us, does the things that it needs to do in case there's any kind of threat or real litigation later on, because you are entering a business relationship with people. You want to protect yourself, right? Keep your guard up. So we're going to put all that paperwork in place. Once you have crossed those thresholds, I understand the strategy, I understand the deal structures, I understand the approach, I understand how to handle objections, I've practiced it. I also know how to memorialize the agreements and put things into paperwork. Well, what's next? Now you're going to get paid because you've got all the elements of the system down. So we need to learn how to market effectively so we can scale the business up. How do we press the pedal to the metal now and bring in more leads where we can deploy our strategies, our deal structures, our approach, our objection handling, and actually get more deals done? That's the marketing. That's the marketing piece. Once you're through that, folks, we're going to talk a little bit about installing our buyers, but that's very much ABC 1, 2, 3, much easier than the acquisitions. You are going to be ready to rock and roll. And it all really starts right now. It all really starts with going through these nightly calls, this cycle. Yes, I've primed you with the course material, but this is the opportunity where there's give, take, calibration, and understanding begins to crystallize. All right, so with that in mind, why don't we go ahead and jump into some of these slides and get going on the strategy. What am I looking at in the chat here? Did I miss something? No, I didn't. Okay, good. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. That side-by-side thing didn't work that we did the other time for some reason. I don't know why, but so some of you might be seeing this on a side-by-side basis, and some of you might be seeing it in the corner. I think when I put the slides into the portal, it just shows me in the corner, which is fine because then you get a bigger picture of the slide. Now, folks, I'm just going to reiterate this. This is the very foundation of what we do. If there's any grouping of slides here in the manual that you want to make sure you really understand, it's this beginning phase, the stuff that we're going to be covering the first week. Because if you don't understand this, a lot of the rest is going to be somewhat superficial, and that'll come across with the sellers. Your seller needs to understand where you're coming from so that you can actually get these deals done. The way I like to push this, as far as our cohort here, is that we can buy any house from any seller. And these are the key methods that we use to build a profitable real estate business. And it covers quite a few different dimensions. Sometimes we will just go out and get a contract with some kind of terms, some kind of price, and we will sell that contract. We never actually take title to the house. This is known as wholesaling. We are simply getting a contract and then selling that paper, selling our position given to us by the contract to someone else who will actually go in and perform what the contract calls for in closing the property. Okay, assignments. Then there are deals that have quite a lot of profit when we improve the value of the property through some kind of a renovation. Fixer-uppers. This is called retailing a house. Sometimes we will do that. But folks, both of these first two that I list here really involve houses that, generally speaking, are in a state of disrepair. Well, what if you could make even more money and not have to deal with houses that are in a state of disrepair, not have to add value to the house, and just leverage your skills, leverage your brain instead of your brawn, your financial brawn and your physical brawn to get rehab properties and fix them up? What if you could just go to sellers who don't have a lot of equity in their house and then take over their payments? Now you own the house, they still have the debt in their name, but we're paying it for them because they don't want to anymore or can't. That's one of my favorite strategies. A lot of people call that taking over properties sub to or subject to. There's differences between the way I instruct us to consummate those deals than what others do, which I think are important differences that come from a lot of experience versus some of the youngsters who are out there who maybe have done it a couple times in a bull market and they think that a bull market is a sign for brains. Well, things go awry and they didn't put the right paperwork in place or the right structures in place. We'll see where they land. Another thing that we do is where a seller will have a lot of equity. And there's no way they're just going to let us take over the underlying loan or let us just, if there's no loan on it and it's just free and clear, we might be able to give them a much higher price, which is what they want. That's not dialed back by realtor fees and inspection concessions and a whole lot of, closing costs and things of that nature. They want to get all the money that the house has earned, but they have to be a little bit patient in getting it. So they will effectively loan us the money, not like handing over the money, but they hand over the house in exchange for us being willing to make payments to them on that price, on that loan. So let's say it's a $400,000 house. The seller doesn't loan us the $400,000 to buy their house because they would be the ones getting the $400,000. Normally, you'd go to a bank, get the $400,000, give it to the seller, right? In this case, the seller is saying, okay, I'll take my $400,000 in monthly payments the same way you would pay a bank, you pay me. And we'll structure monthly payment terms, possibly an interest rate on it, a length of time for when it has to be paid off in full, and an amount. Maybe even a down payment on it. This is called owner financing, seller financing, where the seller, instead of a bank or a private lender or some other lender other than the seller, where the seller is actually transferring the property to you in exchange for payments. Okay, that's owner-seller financing. Now, note that I said transferring the property to you. Well, that seller is owed $400,000 on the example I just gave. What if the seller's like, yeah, I'm good with getting monthly payments and I like the price of $400,000 because if I used a realtor after costs and fees and expenses, I might be looking at $370,000. That's $30,000. That pays for a year or two of my kids' college education, depending on where they're going. But I don't want to just give that to some realtor. So I like the idea of getting the 400, but man, I just cannot live with the idea of giving up the deed on this thing, having my name come off the property until I'm paid in full. Totally reasonable, right? And if we can't get them over that, and there are ways to get them over that, but if we can't, we'll simply say, cool, man. We'll just lease the property from you. We'll rent it from you. But you have to give us an option to buy the property during the term of our lease. That way, you're holding on to title to the deed to the property until I actually give you all the money that you have coming. And then once I do that, then you'll transfer the deed. That way you can still get all the money you have coming. You'll take it in monthly payments, but you still own the property. So if somehow I go afoul, you still own the property. So we can use a lease with a purchase option. Now, what if the seller's like, no, man, I don't like that. I bought this property. It's at Miami Beach. I love this property. I'm going to retire in this property. I don't really want to sell it. I was just looking to do a straight up rental on it until I get to my golden years, till I get to my retirement. Well, what if they will rent it to you at a rate where we can use what's called an arbitrage strategy, which allows us to simply relet the house, sublet the house for more than what our rental payment is with the seller. For example, maybe we get them to allow us to use it as an Airbnb. Now, I've talked about some of the issues and opportunities with that strategy, but if we can rent on a yearly basis at a pretty low rental rate, but then relet or sublet the property on a short-term basis or even on a long-term basis to someone who's willing to pay more, we can make a spread between what our tenant is giving us and what we are giving they're not even a seller, what we are giving our landlord, so to speak. That's rental arbitrage. That's an opportunity. Now, what about where you talk about all these various options with a seller, and the seller is like not really feeling any of this to a great enough degree to get us excited, to get us interested. They want too much money down. They're willing to owner finance it, but they want too much money down. They're willing to let us take over payments, but they want some kind of, lump sum so they can go do something with it. But it's more than what we want to pay. They are willing to give us a discounted price. It's got to be all cash, but it's not quite low enough. They are willing to give us monthly payment terms, but they want to be paid in just a couple of years. They want too high of a monthly payment relative to what the market could withstand. They want too high of a price relative to the way it would appraise. All of those scenarios are possible. So in those scenarios, we have a flexible seller who just wants a little bit more than we're willing to pay. But we have the skills to go out to the market and see what the market will really bring, and we can let the market speak. So what we do is we gain an agreement with the seller for what they're willing to do, but we give ourselves a longer time to close with them, 90 days, so we can go out and test the market, see what the market will bring for our buyer. If we beat the terms that we have with the seller, we'll go ahead and simultaneously close, funding our purchase from the seller out of our buyer's proceeds. If we don't, we have great feedback that we can give the seller on how the market is responding to what they want for their house, and we can either renegotiate the deal based on having a buyer in hand. A bird in the hand beats two in the bush often, and we can then close. Or it didn't work and the seller can do what they want at that point. Or we can convert it to this last option, which is, look, you just want too much for what the market will withstand. Let's go ahead and put it on the multiple listing service and go get that owner occupant bank qualified retail price paying buyer that you're really looking for. All of those buyers are represented by realtors. Therefore, there's going to be a commission involved at some level. And if you're going to pay a commission, you might as well pay it to who's representing you. And you're going to need representation if you're going to fish in that pond. And then we have a whole script that we use to pick up listings when we can't buy the property ourselves. Folks, this is our strategy summed up in about 10 to 15 minutes. So I would suggest that maybe you go back and listen to that dissertation, maybe not the front end of everything I just said, but from the time that I showed this slide to where we are right now, and really ingrain that. Feel that from the top of your head to the bottom of your toes, with your heart pounding in excitement, because you know you can do all these things once we go through the various deal structures that populate these strategies and show you the nuts and bolts of how all this works. I think that would be a good exercise. Now, let's get into some of it then. Let's get into some of it. Knowing how to conduct each of those different deal types feeds right into what I said at the beginning of this presentation, so to speak, which is that it allows you to be consultative with the seller. There's no way the seller is going to sell that house in any other way than one of the things I mentioned on here, with this bottom one down here, having to sell it through a realtor, because most people just want to get all their cash and get out of it. Most people want a bank qualified owner occupant retail price paying cash buyer. The cash comes from a bank because they go get a bank loan, but all of those people are usually represented by realtors. So most deals are going to fall into this category here. I would submit to you that close to 100% of all deals fall across this entire spectrum. You can service every single one of these categories with this strategy. That's why we call it any house, any seller. Now, when you know that in your heart of hearts, from the top of your head to the bottoms of your toes, that's what allows you to be consultative with these sellers and improve your closing ratio and improve your profits massively, because so many of these deals are going to fall into that category. How do we do it? We have to get the seller's defenses down from the beginning, which means not jamming things down their throat, but asking the right questions, learning what they will do and learning what they won't do, and plugging that seller into the right outlet if you figure each of these as an outlet. Your deal flow is going to be directly related to how your character comes across, which I don't really teach in here. I think all of you have that naturally, just to be yourself, be genuine, be authentic. But your competencies, this is a learned skill set, and that's what we're all here for. That's why you're spending time, this evening here, instead of doing other things that you could totally be doing to improve your competency. I have mad respect for that. But your deal flow is going to be directly proportional to how you pick up this expertise that we're talking about here and apply it in your own unique way, based on your own unique personality and based on your own integrity that comes across to these sellers. People want to work with people who have character. And the best way to demonstrate that is not to make statements to people, not to make assertions to people, but to ask them questions with a mindset of truly helping the seller accomplish what it is they want to accomplish, which is going to be one of these things, even if it's this last one. Okay? So let's just start with the deal structure that I frankly like the least, but it's totally fine if you want to do it. The reason I like it the least is because you give up so much and you just don't have to. But there is money to be made here, and sometimes it makes sense to deploy this strategy, which is a strategy of selling, assigning the paperwork that you've created, the binding legal paperwork, the binding legal contract that you have with your seller, that the seller has to comply with, selling that to somebody who's actually going to perform on that contract. That's known as wholesaling. So we go and get a contract to buy a house, and then we simply sell that contract for profit. We never have to close on the house. Once you have a contract, folks, you actually have an asset. Did you know that? When you have a contract, you have an asset. Do you know that in the beginning days of McDonald's, the food chain, people would go and get options on real estate? So they had a contract, they had an option to buy commercial property, and they would go take it to the McDonald's Corporation, knowing that they were scaling up, and simply sell their option to buy that commercial property, not knowing if they were going to close or not. And they'd sell it for big profits. So did they have an asset without ever owning any real estate? Yeah, they had a big asset. They had a contract to buy a property that McDonald's might like. Well, you're going to have a contract to buy a property that some fixer-upper guy might like. Some fixer-upper gal might like. Okay, so you go and get the contract and you sell that. It doesn't have to be a fixer-upper. You can assign terms deals too, but I ask why? Why would you do that? You might as well keep it yourself. Most of the time, the assignments, because why would you assign a terms deal where it doesn't even require any of your own money? You'd be better off staying in the middle like I was just describing. But most of the time the reason people assign is because it does require cash within a certain amount of time, and you're having trouble getting a private lender, or you don't know private lenders, and you don't have the ability to come in and close and rehab it yourself, so you just sell it to somebody who does and walk away with the difference and go do it again. Okay, so these deals are usually sold to a retailing investor, somebody who's going to fix it up and sell it retail, meaning, put it on the MLS and sell it to someone who's going to own or occupy the property. But like I said, folks, you can assign other deal types. Again, I'm going to convince you to not do that, I think, but you can go get properties sub to or with owner financing and just sell those deals. You can easily do that because there's people paying way, way too much for deals that are taken over sub to. And I'm going to discourage you from being one of those people, because those people run a very big risk of getting burnt big time, which is a subject for another conversation. But yes, we can sell terms contracts as well. Also, you might not have to assign a contract. You could actually go get the buyer and simultaneously close your purchase from your seller with the proceeds, with the money from your buyer, and walk away with the difference. In other words, you have a contract to buy something for $100,000, and you have a buyer who's willing to pay $120,000. That buyer brings the $120,000 to escrow to close. The closing agent goes and purchases the property on your behalf for $100,000, transfers it to the person who put the $120,000 in, and you walk away with $20,000. This is all done simultaneously. This is known as a simultaneous closing. The thing of that is that there are lots of laws evolving regarding that kind of a practice, and the practice of assigning contracts and wholesaling and how you market those. So we're going to talk through some of that as well as we get through more of these slides. Okay, so let's do this. Let's go ahead and close on that for tonight. That's a lot to chew on from a strategic perspective. I want you to chew on that. I'd like for you to listen to that maybe a couple, 2, 3 times while you're walking your dog, while you're washing the dishes, while you're on the exercise bike, while you're at the airport, and really ingrain what we just talked about for about the last maybe 20 minutes or so. Put that in your brain, because everything we do from here really comes from what we just talked about. Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat, so I'm going to let y'all go for the evening. I appreciate y'all being with me here this week or tonight, and maybe I'll see y'all tomorrow. Thank you, Maria, and everybody else on here. Peace and love, y'all. Appreciate y'all. Catch up with you on the flip side. Everybody be good. Thank you, Jeanette. Appreciate the thumbs up. Everybody, bye-bye.